Hey, I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radio Lab, and today we begin on a plane.
Thank you, Brooke.
Which carried our newly married producer, Tim Howard, to the Galapagos. So I took the plane from Quito. We had just finished the honeymoon that morning, me and Brink. They make announcements, and at a certain point, the flight attendants, they open up all of the overhead bins and they walk up and down, spraying some sort of insecticide. For what? For like
invasive species, I think.
Yeah, like whatever bugs might have snuck on the plane. By this point, I'm getting super excited, and I'm thinking about Darwin, and I start reading Voyage of the Beagle, his book, on this Nook that I had bought for the trip. But then my power supply didn't work, and my Nook died. That's a big problem for Darwin, too. He kept running out of power.
His Nook, oh God.
And then the islands come into sight.
What is the color of the Pacific Ocean when you look out the plane window?
That was actually the first thing I noticed. It's this totally wild, like I've never seen like this storybook blue-green iridescent aquamarine. And I'm thinking like, wow, this is going to be like dropping into another world, you know, like nature in its purest form.
My version is my dream of what it would be like, is you land on, and it's sort of like low grassy knoll, and an enormous turtle comes by. The one that you could sit on the top of and it wouldn't notice that you were there.
Just going to meet you at the airport.
Just wandering by. And
exactly. That's very similar to what I was picturing. But we land, we take the 40-minute bus ride to Puerto Ayora.
Puerto Ayora.
Which turns out to be kind of a big town. Tons of people live there.
Tons, like a fishing village, tons?
No, it's way bigger than a fishing village. And just let me say that my first hours in Galapagos were totally different than I was expecting. It's sort of the first thing that really just like, where the hell am I? I'm walking through the town, it's kind of late.
The sun is just starting to set.
I'm actually walking down Charles Darwin Avenue. Just kind of getting the lay of the land, when all of a sudden, this line of cars comes around the corner, honking, endless honking, and they're waving flags, blue flags. At first, I didn't know what the hell was happening, but it turns out it was an election rally. And I was just really blown away that this continued, this procession, for like 15 minutes. And I remember asking one guy, they're driving so slow, I can just walk up to them. I sold car, I'm like, who's your candidate? And they're like, I didn't know who the guy was, but it turns out he was the incumbent. And I'm like, is he gonna win? And this guy, he like doesn't even say anything, he just kind of points. He like points at the cars in front and behind, as if like, dude, seriously? You see how many of us there are? But then at a certain point, I noticed this one guy by himself, standing on the sidewalk, wearing a white shirt and jeans. He's waving a flag, but his flag is a different color. It's white. And it's really loud, but I go up to him and I yell at him, who's your candidate? And he said, I am a candidate. And I'm like, what? Are you, seriously? So his name is Leonidas.
Leonidas Parrales, candidato alcalde de aquí, Puerto Ayora y la Santa Cruz.
He is a naturalist guide. You actually end up meeting a lot of people employed that way in Galapagos. And he tells me,
soy un outsider, política.
Politically speaking, he's an outsider. And of course, I'm wondering why he's standing there by himself, waving a flag at this entire parade of people who don't support him at all. And he tells me, well, I'm nervous. If the party in power now, the front runners, if they get elected, then I see a dark and uncertain future. More big hotels, more of these enormous boats, more people. And if things keep going this way, who's going to stand up for nature? This is Radio Lab, and we are dedicating the entire hour to
this little set of islands and to that question.
As the world is filling up with more and more and more people, is it inevitable that even the most sacred, pristine places on the planet will eventually get swallowed up?
And how far are we willing to go to return a place to what it was before we got there?
And more importantly, can we?
Oh, I'm never a doubter.
Okay, so this is Linda.
Linda Cayo, currently the science advisor for Galapagos Conservancy. I began my work in Galapagos in 1981.
She first came to study tortoises.
Back then, Galapagos was really isolated.
Barely any cars, super limited electricity.
All I remember is having a smile on my face all the time. Because, as a biologist, going to Galapagos is like going to Mecca.
She says you have islands with massive volcanoes, forests.
Tree ferns that grow, well above a human's height.
Yeah, powerful colors, there's green mangroves, black lava flows, and pink flamingos.
This is Matthias Espinosa,
A naturalist guide in the Galapagos.
and like Linda, he says that when he first got to the Galapagos in the 80s, he couldn't believe that the place was real.
It was breathtaking.
He visited an island called
Fernandina, and the first thing that I saw was a lava flow that was moving. And I said, what's going on? No, that's not the lava flow. These are like 1,000 sea iguanas taking a sunbath.
and he says he would go on these dives.
Can you imagine? Schools of hammerhead sharks, like 500, 800, passing in front of you. Like tuna. Like sardines. It shows you the power. It shows you also evolution. There is where evolution is very strong.
Okay, so quick context, Galapagos Islands, cluster of islands way off the coast of Ecuador in the Pacific, 19 bigger islands, bunch of smaller ones. And this is the place, of course, where Darwin landed in 1835. And as he went island to island, he started noticing that there were all these creatures that were really similar to each other, but also a little bit different. The tortoises had different shells depending on the kind of island they lived on. The finches looked similar, but their beaks were always a little bit different. And this gets him thinking, what if it isn't the way that everybody always says? What if God didn't create every single species in the beginning and leave them unchanged? What if, in fact, life is purely change? What if everything has been changing all the time? Darwin's 5 weeks on Galapagos pushed him to develop his theory of evolution. And that's also why when we think of evolution, we think of the Galapagos. And in particular, we think of two iconic creatures, the tortoise and the finch. Let me start by telling you about the tortoise. It's hot, it's bright. It is such a perfect day for tortoise hunting. Or not hunting, but, looking for. Fourth day I was there. I went to the island of Floriana, which Darwin visited, and there up in the highlands, basically in the middle of this yard. Oh my God. There are these 3 massive tortoises just clustered together under a tree. Wow, that is freaking amazing.
Describe them. What do they look like?
These are such alien-looking creatures. They're like the size of, I don't even know what. They're massive. They look like they would crush you to death. I wonder how many years these guys have been here for. They can live for over 150 years.
Wow.
This is a tortoise trying to get over a branch.
What was that?
That is the sound of a tortoise breathing.
That's cool.
So Linda, when she first went to Galapagos to study these tortoises about 30 years ago,
I did a trip where we backpacked around the caldera
she took a trip to this island called Isabella, hiked up the side of a volcano.
and looked at all the tortoise country. And it was an impenetrable forest.
Basically tortoise heaven.
And what makes it so perfect for tortoises is in the dry season in Galapagos, the garua, which is a very, very thick mist, comes onto the island.
It rolls over this forest.
And it catches in the branches of the trees,
The water then drips down from the top of the trees down to the ground.
creating what we call drip pools. which provides tortoises with water during the dry season, and they like to rest in water.
And so there, under the trees, you have these ponds with dozens of tortoise domes just rising out of the water.
So that was my first experience. It was a magical, magical area. And then I actually didn't get back there for maybe 15 years from when I was there the first time. And when I returned, that forest was 100% gone. The drip pools were just dry dust bowls.
Wow.
There was no shade.
Tortoises were sitting out in the sun or crowded around the couple of stalks that were still there.
This is Carl Campbell.
I work for Island Conservation, and I'm based here in the Galapagos Islands.
Carl's actually the guy who showed me those tortoises.
It was just it was a barren landscape.
Yeah, barren grounds.
What happened to the forest?
Goats.
Goats.
That was definitely not what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say people.
It was kind of a collaboration. So here's the story.